I'm Nicola Tallant, and you're listening to Crime World, a podcast about criminals, drugs, and the sins of the underworld. We're Ireland's top podcast for 2025, and now we've got a new website. So if you want to learn more about crime and criminals, if you want stories, extras, and podcast subscriber specials, go to www.crimeworld.com.
So the fruits of many a criminal's years of hard work and probably inflicting misery on many people around them comes to a kind of a conclusion today with an auction by Cab, where all that the sort of the misery and struggle that they put in to buy an L watch and a piece of fancy clothing, it sort of comes to nothing, doesn't it? Really.
You'd like to think so.
Yeah.
So they're kind of turning this into an annual event, the Criminal Assets Bureau's sale of seized goods. So this is the third one they've had. There was 100 lots that were up for auction. It was done online, and mostly, I suppose, in terms of the bigger money went on the watches. There's various designer watches, but there was also lots of other interesting things like Christian Louboutin shoes. There was little baby Gucci loafers, Louis Vuitton bags. There was Chanel sneakers. There was Alexander McQueen runners and so on.
Somebody actually texted me and said your pronunciation of Balenciaga runners was a disgrace.
Well, I did confer with our colleague Denise, who had been our fashion correspondent for years. But obviously, by the time I got down to the studio, I'd forgotten it again. So I'm not blaming Denise for that.
Right.
But so there was some of those up. But my pronunciation on Italian goods mightn't always be the best. I'll have to admit that. I'm a bit better at French.
Well, so, I mean, this is obviously the biggest thing seized by Cab tend to be houses and luxury cars, and they're sold off separately, and we have details of them when they go on sale. But this tends to be the kind of the things around that, which is really the designer clothes and
yeah, and it's kind of, I suppose it's the it's the kind of the status symbols, and I suppose it's the reason why some people go into the drugs trade, is because they want to wear trainers of the brand you just mentioned, along with the Rolex watches and the Cartier watches. And the Moncler jackets and the Canada Goose jackets and all the rest of it. So I mean, these are things that are taken off. I mean, the proceeds of crime. They've gone through the Section 3, which is haven't declared as the proceeds of crime, and then you'll have a receiver appointed, and then they're legally bound to sell it for the highest price. So the easiest way of doing that is to put them up for auction. Then you're absolutely testing the market. I
mean, these things are hugely expensive. Not to sound like a real outfit, not aware of how much these things cost, but they do, even at second hand, like they're still making a lot of money.
There is. Yeah, I mean, there was an Audemars watch. Now there was two of them, as far as I could see, up for sale, and one of them was kind of heading towards 40,000.
Yeah.
Now it's probably gone for more than that, because we were kind of rushed straight down watching it. But there was a different version of an Audemars watch that was with just a couple of seconds to go, was heading towards 13,000, and there was kind of bids going in for small amounts, and then it started going at €500 per bid, and it sold off. Then the final bid, as far as I could see, was 17,500. So there was $4,500 added in the final minute. So like there seems to be with some of the items people put down, 30 quid, for instance, the baby Gucci loafers. It was 35 quid since last Friday. And then at the last minute, there was a little bit of a bidding war going up at a fiver each, and it went for €55.
Right, okay.
But
it's probably good value if you're...
Well, certainly if you're into that sort of thing. I don't know how long you get to use them for, unless you have a lot of children, pass them on.
Look.
Or perhaps, it wouldn't surprise me if some of these are, potentially collector's items, and some people are picking these things up for that. But obviously, the professional jewelers really go at it. Just looking at some of the bids, like going up at 500 euros in the last couple of seconds, kind of really shows that they know the value, how much they can resell for. And there was obviously, I mean, the bids were, or the lots, or the auctions, so to speak, for each item were staggered. And the last one, as far as I could see there, was lot 100, was a Rolex Submariner watch, and that went for just over €7,605.
Yeah. So they don't obviously say these are Mr. Flashy's Balenciaga runners, or this is whoever's.
Yeah, but you can kind of, like, I mean, I'm sitting in the Criminal Assets Bureau cases, and this year there was a Krugerrand up for sale that went for 3,700 to 1 ounce gold coin, comes from South Africa. So, I mean, the market value is out there, so everyone knows how much an ounce of gold is worth. And there was exactly the same thing seized from Kieran Sam O'Sullivan, who is so we presume it's his. I can't remember there being a Krugerrand up in any other case. Doesn't mean that there wasn't.
Yeah, but unlikely to be.
But it's quite possible it's Sam O'Sullivan, and we've described him. He's as Christy Kinahan's posh boy protege. He's kind of the well-spoken kid from South County Dublin who became an international drug dealer, as well as a seller of EncroChat phones. And it's not surprisingly enough as well, like he has a collection of iPhone 7s and Galaxy phones that are due up for sale in a separate auction later this month as well. So, and they were all seized as part of an investigation into a money laundering operation that was being run by a Chinese gang based in Dublin. And again, believe it or not, I think that was originally sparked off from some of the EncroChat information. So, like, I mean, yeah, his Krugerrand went for 3,700. And there was also, we did a recent story about two guys in West Dublin, if you remember, Jamie Gagan and his partner in crime in that sense, Brad White. And there was a couple of objects up for sale very similar to what had been seized from them. So, like, say, for instance, like in the case of Brad White, there was a number of things mentioned in the affidavits, like the gentleman's stainless Rolex steel watch, and there was a particular model. It was a 1116234 date just Rolex stainless steel. So there was exactly one of those up for sale as well today.
And how much would that have gone?
And they were all like most of the watches were going pretty much for 5 figures. There was a similar one to that. It was with a couple of minutes to go, was at 10,425, but probably went for more than that. Like the watches, there did seem to be kind of some serious bidders going in at the last minute. You had a Rolex Pearl Master going for 11,000. And there was other ones like, that seemed to be kind of a low enough price, but then would tick up pretty quick towards the end.
Now, Brad White and Jamie Gagan, probably Sam O'Sullivan would stand out in that he's probably a step above most of the people that are having these luxury items seized off them. Most of them are guys kind of at the level of Jamie Gagan and Brad White. These are guys who are sort of in their late 20s or the early 30s that would very much be very significant figures within a community, I suppose, and are living that kind of lifestyle that's visible. And
they were mid-20s when they were being investigated. And you're exactly right, because I mean, in both cases, it was a local Criminal Assets Bureau profiler who basically put the Criminal Assets Bureau onto them. And when they started looking at Jamie Gagan first, they realised then that he was connected to Brad White, and then again found unexplained wealth in the case of Brad White. And so when they raided his house in Tala, that's where the Rolex watches and the Valentino Garvani men's trainers and the Alexander McQueen trainers were seized. I won't mention the Italian one again, just in case I upset your friends who seem to be. But one of the things seized from him as well were two Moncler jackets.
Yeah.
And they seemed to be going for kind of in the 400, 500 euro mark. One of them, there wasn't any kind of last minute bidding, except on one of them. There was a hooded version, and there was two fellas or two people presumably battling it out at a $5 a bid with the last, as it ticked down to 8 seconds.
You weren't tempted to have a little sort of Black Friday?
I wasn't. No, I wasn't. I just figure, the €1,000 kind of deposit you have to put down, which is kind of give me chills, like to spend that much kind of money,
But like Gagan in particular would have been an associate of the family gang. Now the family gang probably are, presumably operating in a slightly more sophisticated way, maybe with their wealth. I mean, that's always said of them, though. I think there have been investigations into them nonetheless, without getting into specifics in terms of the Criminal Assets Bureau. But they would always have these kind of network of guys, slightly younger, who would do, I suppose, the donkey work, really, but very dangerous donkey work. Because Gagan in particular, had a particular reputation, I think, in West Dublin as being an extremely dangerous person. And one of the things that he did get caught for was a very violent attempt to get money off a man.
Well, he's actually serving a 6.5 year sentence for his role in which a man was abducted and taken from a house in Ongar and luckily enough rescued by the guards in Clondalkin near a mobile home, and he had been hooded and tied up with flexes and had suffered a lot of serious lacerations and cuts. And it was mentioned that this man was suspected of stealing heroin from the family. And this is why this kind of, I suppose, justice or whatever was meted out, whether it was to recover the money, recover the drugs, or to exact a punishment, or just to establish a reputation. Like, it certainly, it was a frightening level of violence and a frightening level of, I suppose, confidence that they wouldn't necessarily be caught grabbing someone from outside a house in broad daylight, and only for the fact that the car's reg was reported. And then I think there was surveillance camera had picked things up, which all became kind of important in his conviction. Now there was no evidence that he was actually took part in the torture himself, but he was involved in getting the guy into the 4x4 that was used to take the victim to where he was tortured.
Yeah. Now, all of these auctions, I mean, I don't know when they started. Was it 3 or 4 years ago? Or maybe
it was 3 years ago when they started the Christmas one. But I mean, but at the same time, like there's ongoing property auctions throughout the year.
Yeah.
And we've covered some of those recently. I mean, we saw there was 3 properties belonging to Fat Andy Connors went under the hammer just last week. And in total, they probably raised as much as all these designer goods. So those 3 properties would have been like his... or I suppose I was calling his trophy house in on the Blessington Road in Tala, known as the Villa, valued one time at 3 million, went for, I think the final price was 470,000. And then there was a terraced house in Clondalkin, went for, kind of mid 200,000s. And similarly, there was a field in Saggart as well. So, I mean, it was, I suppose, approaching €1 million, and it's been a long time coming, and it's going towards, I think it's a tax bill that his widow Ann Connors owes for 2.5 million plus interest. So that'll go, it'll take, I suppose, some of the interest off that going forward. But there's been a lot of those houses sold throughout the year, and we've covered them as we
have, and I mean they think they've successfully targeted some of the most notorious criminals in the country. Fat Andy Connors, I suppose, is that house. I mean, that investigation. How long did it go on? I mean, it began a long time anyway.
Look, I mean, it's decades long.
Yeah.
Like it's close to 20 years ago they were investigating. I mean, you had Operation Thor and Operation Fakeler, if you remember, and these were kind of, I suppose, the frontline guards that were going out to try and catch these guys red-handed. But at the same time, I suppose there was a parallel investigation going on to roll up as much of their assets as they could, because, I mean, if you have somebody like Fat Andy and, posing outside his house, which is up for sale, then, at that, whatever time that was, it was more than 20 years ago at this stage, this guy, there's no way he could have had any kind of legal income to have amassed that kind of wealth.
And of course, he did amass an incredible amount of wealth. I mean, we're typically mostly talking, when we come to CAB, about people involved in the drugs trade, and obviously that's where maybe the biggest money is to be made. But Fat Andy Connors, I mean, he wasn't known as a drug dealer. He was primarily known as the head of a burglary gang that really, I suppose, I mean, it's fair to say, terrorised the country at the time.
Yeah, I suppose he would have been in a leadership role. Certainly he would have been the most notable figure in a kind of a loose network of a large number of professional burglars, and that he was very much the finance guy. He was kind of the underworld banker who was helping these guys invest their money, reselling, the stuff that was stolen, whether it was jewellery. At one point it was like tobacco that were going in, like, military precision, breaking into shops, and and then there was also more targeted stuff, where they were kind of selecting sort of business people who might be involved in cash, and and attacking their homes essentially when no one was there, and taking whatever kind of gold and jewellery and stuff that can be quickly and easily offloaded and turning it into cash. And they were proved very effective at that, and it bought a lot of property in and around Tala, Clondalkin. This particular family group in Rathcoole, And I mean, even his father's house was sold off last year, and it went for a decent price. It was a 4-bedroom detached house in Tallaght as well. Can't think of the price off the top of my head. I think it was around the 370 mark. And there was even there was a gang who were involved in burglaries as well, and were operating in Australia, and had sent back something like $1 million Australian dollars, and were buying a piece of land in South County Dublin. So I mean, that hasn't actually come up for sale yet, I don't think. So or actually it may have. I can't remember now. I'll have to check my records. But there's a bunch of, they are rolling them up. It does take a while, but they don't seem to stop. They seem to kind of keep going. When they get the chance, they'll take it off them.
And it is, I suppose, a change of having these auctions publicly. It is probably marks a change in attitude, I suppose, from the old days of CAB, I think, where they are happy to maybe make a point by selling this stuff off and make a point publicly, I think, as well as even Detective Chief Superintendent Michael Gubbins did interviews in the run-up where they're making a point that I think I'm driving a point home to criminals that these things are going to be sold, and there is a degree of certainly getting justice through a bit of maybe public shaming, I suppose, or
yeah, but it's also they want to. I suppose CAB, one of the things is to deny criminals the space to enjoy the ill-gotten gains, and I suppose this sends out a message. And okay, even if it totals close to €1 million in terms of the auction today, which probably won't. I mean, how many kilos of cocaine do you have to sell to make €1 million? But probably not that many. Look, 10 or 15 or whatever it is, and it's But it's like you said, it sends out a message that if you're going to go around dripping yourself with high-end jewellery and nice clothes and driving nice cars, they're going to take them off you. Don't forget, there's a whole series of cars that have been sold this year as well. And everything from Volkswagen Passats to higher-end BMWs and Mercedes.
Yes, and every time the criminals change their methods, CAB do catch up with them and eventually change their methods too. And the misery it caused to buy your watch someday, that watch will be put on a public auction and reported on in all the newspapers. Yeah,
I mean, I suppose like at an international level, I mean, it's been described as an arms race between the authorities and criminal gangs in terms of how to hide the money. And I think I've said it before, like that's what separates the serious criminals from the seriously successful criminals. Is being able to get your money away from the authorities, and not to hide it, but to have it in a place where you can use it and enjoy it and invest it and pass it on to your kids, which you can't do otherwise.
Yeah, exactly. Well, no doubt we'll be back looking at it again next year, Eamon, and still not spending any of our hard-earned money on any...
Not any of our own, anyway. Unless I get expenses to go to some of these auctions to buy a few watches.
We'll consider, I'll put in a bid or for a pair of baby Gucci's for you for Christmas, maybe next year, Eamon.
Thanks. I look forward to that.
Thanks, Eamon.
Always a pleasure now.